Good evening, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. I hope you're doing very well tonight. Break the Ice, a very cool printing, if you don't mind me saying so, here on the last day of spoiler season. A card that is certainly welcome in the mid-range archetype. I think we can say that it will rock, that it will jun, that it is dead, etc. But I would say that it is not strictly better, not even close to being strictly better, at least, than any other option, and is indeed more of a meta call than your more generically useful, don't leave home without an LD effect of Fulminator Mage, Pillage, maybe even Cleansing Wildfire for some of you is in that category. Break the Ice is narrower. It's definitely narrower, but its ceiling is higher in two different ways. It's got an efficiency ceiling with a very low CMC for a true Stone Rain effect, and it's got a high ceiling in terms of the power level with the overload cost. So Break the Ice. For 2 black, you get a sorcery that reads Destroy target land that is snow, or could produce colorless mana. So obviously the sinkhole comparisons are pretty live here. This is clearly a reworked sinkhole, something that is less part of a destroy all of your lands Black Panza style strategy no matter what the opponent is, and rendered into more of, as I say, a narrow but very, very effective hate piece against certain archetypes. Sinkhole would be very, very oppressive in Modern. I've toyed with the idea of it entering Modern, don't get me wrong. Sometimes the big mana decks drive you to madness a little bit that way. Break the Ice, though, nothing like Sinkhole in terms of main deck ability or in terms of kind of adherence to a very busted Panza-style strategy, and that's no surprise. Wizards has said that they regard land destruction as an unfun strategy, having harvested data on that front from their player base, so we don't expect to see direct support for a strategy like that. So Break the Ice limited, of course, by what it can target with this Destroy Target Land effect. Again, it has to be snow, or it has to be able to produce colorless mana. Break the Ice, though, also has an overload cost for 6, so 4 generic double black. You may cast it for its overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So then you've got a one-sided Armageddon-style effect, assuming your opponent is on all or mostly snow lands or lands that could produce colorless mana. So what is this actually good against, given how narrow it is? Well, I think you all know, my friends, the number one target for this. All of the structures raised by Urza. We've got the tower, we've got the mine, we've got the power plant. None of them are safe from Break the Ice, trust me. And that, of course, is big news for mid-range players, right? Because we, in the past, have either been playing Fulminator Mage and Pillage and so on and so forth, which are powerless unless we ramp them out early, which we've never done in the past, to break up Tron when we are on the draw. And if you're trying to break up Tron on the draw, you have to rely, on Assassin's Trophy and Cleansing Wildfire, which are very good cards that are very useful across the metagame as well. But crucially, they are not as high ceiling as Break the Ice against Tron because all they do is downgrade a Tron land to a forest, which in some ways turns on other cards for them, and in other ways is just a speed bump for them. And granted, I think this is a good strategy to employ still, but now we do have the option. If Tron is the big mana deck of choice in any given metagame, you're casting Sinkhole against Tron. Against Tron, this card is almost exclusively almost always a sinkhole. Very, very strong there. And that is far and away the most relevant use case for this and the most powerful use case for this. As if that wasn't enough, if you're in a long game against Tron, if you're kind of slogging it out, maybe you've cast a Break the Ice on T2 to slow them down as you kind of curve out, but then you start flooding, you draw another Break the Ice. Don't worry, you can overload it. Tron player gonna scoop it up right then and there. Perhaps flip the table along the way too. We wouldn't be surprised, right? But utility lands are good against mid-range decks. You can almost regard them as ramp that turns into a creature in the late game, or a creature that ramps in the early game as you prefer, but they dodge sorcery speed removal. They can pressure our planeswalkers. It's actually a bit of a problem sometimes to win games against creature land heavy opponents. Another deck that comes to mind, and I'm not going to get too lost in the weeds with this stuff because the metagame's about to go completely on its head, right? So we'll have to assess this, exactly how many targets there are for Break the Ice after MH2 has been around for a few weeks. But Caves of Koilos here of course representing black-white Eldrazi taxes. These pain lands, those are absolutely vulnerable to this type of disruption too. And it is already kind of feast or famine for them in terms of how clunky their progressions are, whether or not they have Ether Vial. So if they don't have an Ether Vial progression and you're casting sinkholes against them, they're really just never going to get going in a way that is fast enough to keep up with your card quality on a mid-range deck. On the other hand, if they do have Ether Vial, maybe they just shrug off this Break the Ice and proceed to outvalue you because you traded a spell for a land that they didn't need all that much. The final thing I want to mention here in this little section, talking about colorless producing lands, is that notably, Break the Ice is pretty poor against Amulet Titan compared to a lot of the alternatives that I've mentioned in here. That's definitely something you need to take into account. If Amulet Titan is your number one most feared big mana deck, maybe you don't reach for this card. However, having said that, and I do think that's true, there are actually sometimes a surprising amount of colorless producing lands in an Amulet Titan list. This one is literally just top of Goldfish. I didn't, go cherry picking it. But if you scroll down, we've got 2 copies of Cavernous Souls that this can hit. It can hit a Crumbling Vestige, can hit a Ghost Quarter, or I guess Force a Ghost Quarter activation would be more accurate. It can hit Radiant Fountain, Slayer Stronghold, Sunhome Fortress of the Legion. Now, these types of lands are not the ideal Titan lands to play out in the early game. Most of the time. Some of them are, like Radiant Fountain is good early. But generally, the Stronghold, the Sunhome, these are ones that they go tutor more often than not. But Titan is a deck that is going to keep lots of lands and just functional hands against a mid-range deck most of the time. The last thing they want to do is mulligan toward a slightly faster and cleaner hand and then end up mulling to Oblivion against the discard deck. It's just not what they do. So they're going to keep some goofy hands with, playing some goofy colorless lands out early, and maybe, just maybe, if your matchup is bad enough and you think the upside is high enough, you can bring in Break the Ice and go for that sinkhole against Amulet Titan and hope they provide an opportune target for that. This might be especially effective early in the MH2 meta before Titan players are used to playing around this. Tron players are going to have it on their radar from minute 0. Titan players, maybe not so much. Maybe you can catch one unawares. So remember, Break the Ice can destroy target land if it is snow, in addition to, or if it is producing colorless lands. Now, there's been an argument out there for a while now that it is strictly incorrect to play any basics that are not snow covered, because there's no meaningful way to punish snow in Modern, and also, if you're not playing snow, you're not bluffing snow effects. And I think that was most true during the Astrolabe meta, right? I have argued a little bit against it, even though I kind of respect the argument, and my counter-argument was this. Your performance in Magic is about your morale to some degree, obviously. Skill matters, experience matters, meta-knowledge matters, but also, if you're having fun and you're immersed and you're enjoying the experience, you will commit your brain power to thinking out lines more so than if you're annoyed or if you're agitated or if you're not having that much fun. Therefore, playing your favorite basic lands does have a tangible impact on how the game goes. So while if we were all robots or algorithms playing this game, yes, it would be correct to play snow-covered lands all the time. I would argue that there is also a counter-argument to just play your favorite lands, right? But now we have also a factual non-morale-based argument. So technically there has been Snowland hate since Cold Snap with Fraelus's Radiance. This card is actually pretty cool, but just totally horrid, totally unplayable. Thermokarst exists. You can gain 1 life off of a green Stone Rain if you destroyed a Snowland. Very epic play. Unfortunately not legal in Modern. And then Kaldheim brought a much more impressive snow hate card. We have Rydane, God of the Worthy. She is a double-sided card. We've got Valkymira Protector's Shield on the backside that prevents damage from sources and counterspells or abilities unless the opponent plays 1, so it's like a damage prevention and taxing effect. And then on the front half, it's a 2/3 Flying Vigilance that causes Snowlands to enter tapped if they enter under your opponent's control, and is another taxing effect. Despite the flexibility of this card, it's just not powerful or pushed enough to see modern play, and thereby was not really a meaningful check on snowland bases. But now we have Break the Ice, and now you could get really punished for just playing snow basics for no good reason. So you can expect people to stop playing snow basics by and large for no good reason. It's not worth bluffing Ice Fang Quattle or whatever it's going to be anymore if you run afoul of Break the Ice just for the bluff, right? And this is good news for us, right? Because this might reduce the presence of Ice Fang Quattle in general, and if we do see snowlands, we can more or less be sure that we have to play around this card. In this card, with Flash, with Cantrip, with Death Touch, it's obviously a nightmare for a Tarmogoyf deck to play against, right? So all of this is good news for us, kind of a passive benefit of Break the Ice entering the format. The other thing that Teferi here represents is that snow control was a thing before in the past. It could be a thing again in the future, and it doesn't necessarily need an Astrolabe unban, which I think is very unlikely for it to be the case. And in that case, remember how, back like 3 years ago, it used to be a pretty common strategy to play Fulminator Mage against blue-white control, right? Because it's either a Grey Ogre that can pressure, you can sack in response to a Supreme Verdict to get a little value, or if you are on the play especially, but you're finding those on curve, you can set your opponent off curve and try to get ahead. With Break the Ice being kind of a sinkhole against a theoretical snow control deck, that does all of the above, except going Grey Ogre mode, I guess, and also has the potential win condition of Overload if you do get there in the late game, and if that's the play to make. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily the axis on which we should be attacking, but it's just another example of the flexibility of Break the Ice. And now one final trick I've got to show you, my friends, for those of you who are dedicated to kind of building your own sinkhole, the smallpox players among us. Lithiform Blight. So this card is cantripping big mana hate because it downgrades whatever land you're touching, mostly. It's mostly a downgrade, but it's only really playable against big mana decks, and it fixes their mana while taxing them for life a little bit. It's kind of a weird card, but it's not actually that bad. If cards like Cleansing Wildfire didn't exist, this might actually see a little bit more play. As it is, Lithiform Blight could let you double down on a land denial plan in two different ways. Number one, it itself, again, it cantrips, it downgrades the really powerful big mana lands. Number two, Lithiform Blight then enables Break the Ice, turns Break the Ice into a sinkhole. So it's a 4-mana sinkhole, but it cantrips, and you can spread the cost over multiple turns. So that's a nasty little trick. Obviously, it's all pretty janky, requires a lot of setup, not really going to be oppressive in Modern, but I know one of you is going to do it. I know one of you has that type of mentality, and it will be a cool bucket list moment if you get to pull that off. So there you go, my friends. Those are my thoughts on Break the Ice. It is a nice tool to have. I don't know if I plan necessarily to register it right away, because I don't know if I expect to see all that much Tron right out of the gates. But Tron, if history has showed us anything, is the unkillable deck of Modern. So I don't expect Tron to be totally dead, and maybe it will be a deck more like Dredge that waxes and wanes a little bit based on the amount of hate in the meta. And Break the Ice, make no mistake, is very, very powerful hate against that archetype specifically. So this is good news for us overall. It's another tool in the toolbox, and it's a pretty well-designed card as far as I can tell. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate you for tuning in, and let me know what you think in the comments below about Break the Ice. Talk to you later.